The last few days of 2017, my usual power through attitude went out the window. I pretty much run off of sunshine and sarcasm, but as the new year came, my internal cheerleader disappeared and my outlook got pretty dark. In general, I'm a very future focused, plan oriented kind of person. You know that saying, you're either growing or you're dying? Well, I live a you're either moving or you're dying kind of life. Some days that desire to move is motivated by inspiration, while other days it's more of a very desperate energy. Either way, the world of self employment has created this drive in me not to sit still and to just keep going. So, at the end of 2017, when the internal voice that says keep pushing through disappeared, I was left with this real moment of reflection. I started 2017 with the attitude that this year was going to be different. We're going to work hard, create a real household income, and not be stuck in our current situation until we die. A quick recap of our current situation. Obsess about work 24/7, dare not think of moving or changing our lifestyle because we're living on the lowest rungs of life with our cheap apartment and no frills living. But our 2017 income wasn't better off. It was a lot of work with more perceived reward than actual reward. So at the end of the year, I was taking inventory for the first time, and the lack of progress felt like a huge blow. The reality check was that it was a year wasted, and it hit me hard. It really wasn't a year wasted, but that was the pity party in my head. After 7 days of pity, my internal cheerleader still hadn't come back to break up the pity party. I knew from the past that my well of darkness can run pretty deep, so I monitor my conscious negativity on a daily basis. If I see a spark of negativity, it's my job not to let it turn into a flame. I take my mood very seriously. If I dip my toe in the pool, it is not long before I think I'm drowning. I am an emotional baby if I take my hands off the wheel. In an effort to turn this frown upside down, I pretty much went back to basics. The basics. I calmed the hell down and stopped reviewing the parts that were my failures and mistakes. Reviewing the failures was seriously the entirety of my pity party. I figured I could get more insight out of the mistakes if I cheered the hell up. Instead of looking to the past, I looked ahead. I asked my brain, what is the life other than my own that actually inspires me? I imagined living in a beautiful home. I didn't picture a generic house. I specifically pictured a home, something that was warm and inviting and felt lived in and loved. Part of the package for this fantasy home is that it's in walking distance to an Aldi and a well-funded library. This is seriously part of disarming the negativity in my head. If I can see myself walking out of my front door to a basic adventure, I feel like there's a glimmer of hope left in the world. And I imagined all the ways a home would support Mark, my husband. The man needs a garage. He has not built an instrument since we lived in the tiny house in the woods like 5 years ago. With my emotions shifted, my head was clear to now look at the past with more analysis and not so much emotion. Looking at our expenses. As much as I knew what all of our expenses were, I had overlooked the value in taking a refresher. Part of the reason why I overlooked reviewing our expenses was because our life is so minimal. Like, what's there even to review? We don't have kids. We don't have pets. We've been in the same apartment for like 5 years, which is 30% below market value. There are new owners, so that will be changing. We have one used car, blah, blah, blah. What does all this mean is that it didn't really seem like there was much to review. But upon further inspection, I saw that our grocery bill was consistently really high. I do have this food blog, so that does account for some of the additional spending. The amount of times in 2017 that I really did think to myself, I should just go get some minimum wage job to supplement my income, was more than I could count. So when I wrote out every expense we had, and I saw how much we spent on groceries, it occurred to me that I could likely skim $300 away from our groceries and funnel it into our dreams and goals. Side note, did you know that in 2012, Mark and I saved $24,000 in 18 months while I was waiting tables and he was making $10 an hour at a grocery store? It said that the 3 biggest costs in life are housing, food, and transportation. If you're driving an expensive car, living in a nice place, or indulging in prepared foods and drinks, then you're leaving money on the table. If you could get any of those costs down, then it could change your life. Our grocery bill was the only realistic area in our life where money could be skimmed from. Important mathematical digression. Let's say your three main areas could all come down just a notch. If you're spending $25 less a week on food, drove a vehicle that was $100 less a month, and found a home or an apartment that was $100 less a month, that $300 a month savings could simply be put towards retirement, and in 10 years that would compound into $50,000, or $100,000 in 15 years, or $400,000 in 30 years. The hidden $400,000 was sitting in my grocery bill. My goal in saying this isn't that everyone should take their life down a notch. I actually want to take my life up several notches, but I want it to be a win-win for my future and present self. Ultimately, I want a long timeline of winning at life. If I spend all my money on food, I want to do that by choice, not just something that's happening because I'm being a dumbass. Because I have a food blog, I figured that one post a week would serve me much better than striving for 2 blog posts a week like I had done all of 2017. I still needed to get clear on how we would reduce our food budget thoughtfully. So everything above was my why. Why being that I need a house to call a home. I need to prepare for retirement. My old man goals are real. I feel them in my bones. And for years now, I've been feeling the pressure to save and truly thought that we just didn't have enough money in order to save. What I'm about to explain is different. When it really sank in that I could actually be ready to start saving money now and getting my financial life together, I started looking on YouTube for how to grocery budget extreme. After clicking on a few videos, my enthusiasm pretty much went into the trash and I clicked out of YouTube. I wanted the ins and outs of a working system. I wanted to understand how to get my act together, but instead I was weeding through videos of random people showing what they bought and what was in their freezer. I didn't need to see what anyone was buying. I've got my own food habits and preferences. I don't need to see their what. I needed to understand their how, which led me down this rabbit hole. Turns out that in order to master this one area of my life, which I have complete control over, I needed to look at 6 areas of grocery shopping instead of just the one that most people focus on in their videos. Plus, I needed a backup plan in case I got bored or fell off the wagon. So let's go over the 6 areas of grocery shopping so you can be in control of your money in your future. And if any part of your psyche is thinking, but I don't make enough money to save, just relax, you're closer to your dreams than you think. This video is the summary of a 10,000 word blog post. The link is below in case you leave this video wanting more tips or to dive deeper into the 6 areas. This video is just the summary of that blog post. Last thing, do you want printable worksheets to take the guesswork out and keep you on track to getting rich? I created a 15-page printable workbook which goes over each of the 6 areas. There's a cheat sheet of over 70 recipes you can print out and put on your refrigerator. There's like a blank grocery list that you can fill out and stay on track. Meal planning, meal prepping. There's all sorts of stuff to print out to help you. The link to my Etsy shop, I Plan, I Can, is down below, as well as a 20% off coupon, but let's get into it. The 6 areas of grocery shopping include why, when, where, who, what, how. Knowing your why. I already told you my why. You pretty much need to know your why. Write down your goals in as much detail as possible. If your goal does not make you excited, then dream bigger or weirder. Either way, do not skip this step. If you want to change your life, you need to know what you're going to change it to. Write it down. Knowing your when. Huge round of applause for me because I finally connected the dots. That timing is another variable that can help you get your grocery budget goal. When is not just the days of the month you will be shopping. Here's some other scheduling that can be brought in to work in your favor. Store cycling. This can simply be alternating between your preferred store and a cheap grocery store. Like every other week you could go to the cheap store or create a once a month cycle for cheap groceries. Well, the remaining weeks of the month you shop at your preferred grocery store. It's totally up to you. Ingredient cycling. This is my loophole to prevent me from overfilling the cart. I'll see like 3 bags of chips or like 3 different piles of fruit and be committed to all of them. The amount of times I put multiple of the same thing, like think a huge watermelon, a pineapple, and a huge bag of kiwi. The amount of times I've put that all into the cart at once, it makes no sense. Pick out one thing. If it doesn't last all week, I'll survive. Buy less, use the pantry to fill in the gaps, and write down the items you wish you could buy now on future grocery trips to appease your crying mind. How often you go grocery shopping is a major way to stack the deck in your favor. By following a schedule, it forces you to make the most of what you have. Food group cycling. Instead of getting all of the things you like, pick a limited number of things per food group. Maybe instead of buying bread, pasta, tortillas, you pick one or two for this week since they're pretty much the same food group. And then the next grocery trip, you pick out one or two different carbs. Same with produce, same with proteins, same with snacks, desserts, etc. Over the course of a month, you'll have a good variety of food, but less variety day to day, if that makes sense. Another part of food group cycling is picking one thing from your pantry as a placeholder for that week. For example, the last few months, we've become loyal LaCroix sparkling water addicts. By cycling the sparkling water in every single grocery week, I've completely forgotten about the hordes of herbal tea in my pantry. Unannounced to my husband, I'm going to start laying off the sparkling water and drink cold brew herbal tea. The sparkling water will last twice as long since I won't be drinking it, and I'll be whittling down my ignored herbal tea stash. Delayed gratification. Delayed gratification should be done with care. When finding the line between taking what you want for now and leaving enough for later can be enlightening, but also a challenge. There are some personality types, like my own, who are first to dive into the deep end of deprivation when trying to get my finances in order. While self-induced deprivation may not seem like a big deal, I think it secretly is. I think being in the headspace of deprivation can be toxic when there's neurochemical rewards such as feeling like a total badass or feeling in control or having some sort of purity complex about doing things the right way. No one can decide what deprivation is for someone else. Feel your way through it. Breaking your own rules is a good way to test what's actually working for you or not. Remember, the goal isn't to feel frugal. Often that feeling is a distraction. If you save $2 a day by brewing your own coffee instead of going to Starbucks, but overlook saving tens of thousands of dollars on house payments because your credit isn't top notch, then you're living in a fantasy based on the perceived value of being frugal than actually being frugal. There's a podcast/blog post called How to Spend Less and Earn More with the Afford Anything, Not Everything blog. She goes in depths with the pitfalls of living in fantasy of such accomplishments while ignoring the bigger picture. She gives classic examples of ordering a cheaper item at a restaurant or getting water instead of soda, and why that's not the best way to run your financial life. The book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, goes above and beyond with explaining exactly how to create a healthy financial life. It's an actionable step-by-step, 6 weeks to success kind of book. The author Ramit Sethi rails against people getting distracted by the perceived wins of being overly frugal. He is against people cutting out lattes to save a buck. And the audiobook is hilarious. Delayed gratification is great when you know your why, then trade-offs make sense and you know it's worthwhile. Do I want a greasy bag of chips and some extra produce? Or a dream house with a secured future? See, this one's not hard. Taking a break and delaying the gratification of a great meal can take your flavor inflation down a notch. I've heard my father-in-law say many of times it may not be worth trying a $50 a pound ham or a $300 bottle of whiskey. What if I find out I really like it? It's not worth it. There's a huge trap that pretty much every one of us falls into, and it's lifestyle inflation. When we're youthful, living at home, or in our first apartment, we might be comfortable with the simplicity of our life. We listen to music, hang out with friends, read books, live on ramen. As we become more valuable in our jobs, our paycheck reflects that, and our lifestyle inflation happens. The fact that many people who earn more than $200,000 a year can live beyond their means should be a reminder to everyone else on the totem pole that lifestyle inflation needs a yearly review to keep it in check. It's hard to go backwards in life. Adults don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Last year, I got hotel inflation. I don't want to go back to crappy motels. It happens to all of us. I talked about this above. There are 3 main areas in your life where lifestyle can inflate: housing, transportation, and food. Delaying gratification in the food department can prevent flavor inflation. Cheap versus expensive cycling. Cheap versus expensive cycling can be as simple as just picking one fancy meal a week to make it home, or even one fancy meal a month. Or having one fancy meal every day alongside 2 low-budget meals to complement it. I wrote a few paragraphs in the blog post about fresh versus frozen versus canned versus dried, which fits into this category. All right, meal planning. Meal planning is one of the most straightforward ways to buy what you need. Anyone else have moments where they buy too many random condiments? If you have a meal planned for the next 7 days, then you'll cut down on buying random accessory ingredients just in case. Take the guesswork out of what you need to buy for some fictitious meal. Write down what you want to make for the week and just buy what you need for that. Meal prepping. Meal prepping is taking your planning for the week and just knocking it out. No questions asked. What's for dinner, somebody asks? Bam! Then Chuck Norris punches like a meal prep in their direction. Same thing as yesterday. I wrote a bit about meal prepping in the blog post. Knowing your where. Before you go shopping, you really need to decide where you're getting your groceries from. I'll leave it up to you to decide how much you need to shop hop between stores in order to get the prices you want. I personally hate driving to a million places to get one ingredient here and one ingredient there. If I lived in the suburbs, I might be more into it, but in Dallas, with the traffic, the huge parking lots, the long grocery store lines, it just kills my inspiration to save a buck. I was considering making a video showing the cost differences between some basic foods between stores. Like, here's a bowl of pasta and sauce from Aldi, which is literally 30 cents, versus how much that same bowl of pasta and sauce would cost from like Whole Foods. Things to consider when picking stores to shop at. How many stores are you willing to drive to? Who sells the most affordable staples and affordable produce? Is it the same store? Do you want to go to a store with a lot of options or fewer? I recommend writing out your staple groceries and spending a couple hours going to 2 to 5 stores to compare prices. I straight up went to Aldi with my phone, took pictures of all the price tags with every single staple item I'd be willing to buy. I put those pictures in a folder on my computer. I think I looked at them a bunch for like a week and I haven't really needed to look at them since. The store comparisons should only take an afternoon. Do it once, get it out of the way, and consider it a one-time investment in getting a rock-solid grocery budget pillar in place. Stores to compare. Even if you don't normally shop there, you might be surprised. So here are the stores to compare. Local supermarkets like Kroger, Wegmans, Walmart. Health food stores, Whole Foods, Natural Grocers, Trader Joe's. Bulk stores, Costco, Sam's Club. Discount stores, 99-cent only store, Aldi. Ethnic grocery stores, Mexican stores, Asian stores, Indian grocers. Online options like Thrive Market, Amazon, Fresh, farmers markets, and CSAs. The one benefit I personally appreciate from smaller grocery stores like Aldi and ethnic grocery stores, as opposed to supermarkets, there's less decisions to make. There's less shiny objects to capture my heart and mind and pull me away from my grocery list. And there's way less decision fatigue, which I'll talk about more in a second. Here's me when I go to my beloved Kroger flagship store. I walk down a whole aisle dedicated to the tiny little jar of mustard I want to buy. I don't see the one I want. I see like 5 ones that I want and 50 other versions in my peripheral that sound even better than the one I had in mind when I wrote my list. When I wrote down plain mustard, I'm thinking a universal condiment. But when I start salivating at the sight of spicy mustard, I start picturing specific things I want to eat it with. It's a trap. Now I want to start buying unplanned stuff to fulfill this imagery in my mind. Oh, maybe I should buy some bread. There were 0 plans to make sandwiches this week, but this exotic mustard has just inspired me to make gourmet sandwiches or whatever. The decision overload doesn't stop there. Now I'm comparing prices between the fancy mustard and the cheap mustard I had written on my grocery list. I'm comparing prices of all the cheap mustards, like the hundreds of different brands. One bottle is 12 ounces for 99 cents. Another bottle is 14 ounces for $1.09. And then my head explodes. After the mental facilities are taken out, I am 2,000 times more susceptible to throwing like random bags of chips in my cart. Decision fatigue can cause all sorts of craziness. Irrational trade-offs in decision-making can create irrational impulse purchases, impaired self-regulation. Some people just avoid making decisions already, like a little kid is like throwing stuff in the cart and you're just like, fuck it, let's roll with it. And it's been shown that you make less favorable decisions. Essentially, decision fatigue makes you lose your mind while you're in the middle of making financial decisions. Okay, so I go to Aldi and there are 2 or 3 mustards to choose from, not a whole aisle. Some people would see that as a strength, others would see that as a weakness, but less choices means stronger decision faculties. Knowing your who. Something to consider is that the person who prepares the meal may not be the best person to buy the groceries. When my husband and I both cook, I would say I'm more future focused than him. Being at the grocery store can trigger my planning mind to think, ooh, maybe I should buy this random ingredient. I could make a few meals with this. But if I write out a grocery list, like I'm the coach with a winning playbook, as the coach, I don't need to perform the moves. I just need a star player to follow through with the plan. The times that I've handed the grocery list off to Mark has been effortless way of staying on track and not overspending. He just buys what's on the list. If you have a couple of teenagers in your family, ask one with the most obliging personality to go to the grocery store and stick to the list. If you live on your own, you can ask a friend to go shopping with you, and then you guys can trade grocery lists and pick out only what's on the other person's list. This works best when you have specific brands and package sizes written out so that your buyer is getting the brands and quantities that you want for your budget. Knowing your what. No one can say what you should buy, make, or eat. There are so many variables that make grocery shopping super individual. Food habits, cultural habits, flavor preferences, diet rules, like if you're paleo, vegan, keto, vegetarian, raw food is counting calories, etc. Diet restrictions for medical reasons, budget restrictions, how many people you shop for, activity level, what kind of food you have access to, how much food you can even store in your apartment or home, and what cooking appliances you have access to. What initially got me inspired to piece this puzzle together was looking up how to extreme grocery budget on YouTube and not finding enough resources. I watched YouTube videos of people showing me what they bought and what their meals look like, what was in their freezer. Dude, seeing what you eat doesn't help me. Looking in your freezer is as helpful as opening up my freezer and taking a peek inside. It's like seeing what you eat doesn't directly help me understand how it fits into the bigger picture of grocery budgeting. What you eat is 100% your choice. There's cheap plant foods, there's expensive plant foods. There's cheap animal foods, there's expensive animal foods. There's cheap beer, there's expensive beer. The point I'm making is that whatever your lifestyle is, 99% of us in the US of A can skim some extra dollars off the top and it can change our life. When I talk about how I plan meals, you'll see that they're carbohydrate centered. The rice I have in my pantry is literally 4 cents a serving. But do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you eat low carb or avoid grains or anything like that, what I'm saying applies to you. There are trade-offs to make. A budget is simply saying that out of the whole pile of money you have for the year, this amount will be put towards your goal and this other amount will be going towards your expenses. Here are some basic decisions to frame your what. Do you prefer balanced meals? Do you choose meals dominant in protein, carbs, or fat instead of balanced? Do you need high volume meals like a mountain of veggies in order to feel full, which is pretty much me? Do you have a small appetite? Do you have non-negotiable foods you will not give up or replace? Do you prefer foods labeled organic? Are you store or brand loyal with some or all of your shopping? Do you have any interest in meal preps, homemade freezer meals, crock pot and instant pot meals? What foods do you buy often but avoid eating? What foods are you quick to consume after buying? Do you buy a lot of snacks, junk food, pre-made food, frozen packaged meals? How often do you go out to eat, and is this amount aligned with your goals? And what snacks fit best into your budget? This list will help you get clear on your priorities, habits, and assumptions. Changing your shopping behaviors will be easier when you know what your bright lines are. What's a bright line? Ultimately, it's a standard or a rule that is clearly defined. If you want to start buying cheaper beer or buy less packaged food, using the word cheaper or less might be too vague to get you to your goal. It's unclear where you're drawing the line, which makes it impossible to determine if you're actually achieving what you've set out to do. Let's say you're a beer fanatic. You don't want to give it up, but you're willing to commit to a 6-month saving on beer money. You make this a 6-month non-negotiable rule. So instead of making a promise to yourself to buy cheaper beer or to buy less beer, you establish a bright line around your beer budget, cheaper unless they're too vague. The bright line could be $25 a month on beer. Then you decide what you want to buy more, cheap beer or simply buy fancy beer, just less of it. You know that once you hit your $25 budget, you're done for the month since that's your bright line. You do not cross that line. Another thing to consider when you think about shopping priorities is to do what Ramit Sethi recommends in I Will Teach You to Be Rich, the book I mentioned earlier. He says, spend extravagantly on the things you love and cut mercilessly on the things you don't. If you do not love your laundry detergent, then buy the cheapest one. If you're not in love with your olive oil brand, then buy the cheapest one. Maybe it's just me, but I cannot tell the difference between 99% of packaged foods when it comes to comparing store brand versus name brand, especially at Aldi. I really think many of them could be manufactured by the same companies than just privately labeled between the different brands. If you compare store brand cookies versus Oreo cookies, the ingredient line matches up perfectly and the nutritional information is identical. If it's not the same manufacturer, then it's practically the same recipe. Figuring out your how. Know how much your grocery budget is. Know how often you'll go shopping. Know what cornerstone carbs, fats, and proteins you'll buy most often. Plan for redundancy, alternatives, and backups for your food choices. Expect challenges to come up and then look for solutions. Write out a menu and food lists to take the guesswork out of future planning. Determine what your ideal serving of food will cost you. Determine if you need to start slowly or go all in with your budgeting. How to plan your grocery shopping. Plan a regular $21 food challenge. Monitoring and reviewing your results. Finding inspiration and mentors. Handling burnout and boredom. I wrote a whole bunch on the blog post talking about planning for obstacles and having the right mindset. Notice problems and brainstorm all of the solutions. Proactively look for any excuses, loopholes, and obstacles that your mind offers. Are there loopholes in your mind saying, hey, let's buy this $1 bag of vending machine chips, that's fine, you can afford it? Notice how your mind lets you off the hook for staying on your budget. Write out every single excuse and the circumstance surrounding the excuse. Do not just think this through. You need to write it down every single time. This is if-then planning. If a problem comes up, then here's the planned solution. By writing out excuses on paper, you might see a pattern. Let's say every day you're at school and you buy soda from the vending machine. Your brain says, oh, just this one time, but you notice from writing it down that this happens all the time. So instead of spending money at the vending machine, you'll just plan to bring extra drinks every day. Your predictable problem now has a solution. Write out menu and meal ideas. I have a homemade cheat sheet that stays on my fridge. As obvious as these meals are, and as simple as the pool of ingredients I have to choose from are, I still get foggy thinking when it comes to actually planning a meal. My cheat meal pretty much is this: 4 main staple foods: rice, pasta, beans, tortillas, with a slew of variation. Think casseroles, crock pots, how different cultures would use the same ingredient, mixing and matching the accessory ingredients and sauces. I wrote in the blog post about the $21 food challenge, where basically once a month or even once a season, you have a week living off of your invisible food in the pantry and freezer. The idea is that you get $21 a week to buy basic things. Maybe you need a gallon of milk and a mountain of lettuce in order to get through the week, but those things are obviously not in your pantry. So just $21 food challenge could save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a year. Again, this challenge is meant to be done maybe once a month. It's not meant to be done every single week. I'm going to end on this note. You need to monitor your results. In my printable packet, I have a 52-week sheet where you write down week to week how much you spend on your groceries. If you track week to week, you start to see a pattern in your behavior, which can be really enlightening. If you're not tracking your progress, it's easy not to get to your goal and not really know where you got off track. Now, before I finish the video, I'll mention a few more things I wrote about in detail in the 10,000 word blog post. Number 1, there's a right and wrong way to get your family on board with changing your grocery spending. Spoiler alert, do not assume anyone has your values, and do not tell other people what their values are. Ask them what they would like out of a grocery budget and how cutting back on groceries would make them feel. Then find a common ground and be willing to compromise. Number 2, know your tendency. When changing your life, you're putting new expectation on yourself. How you manage expectation is fundamental to how you follow through on your goals. This is not one size fits all. Some people require hand-holding in order to follow through, others do not. Do not be ashamed or embarrassed. Embracing yourself as you are will get you across the finish line way faster than spending all your time trying to work on yourself and never getting started. I wrote a bunch about Gretchen Rubin's 4 tendencies in this blog post. Number 3, find mentors. I posted some links to a few blog posts that really inspired me to look at my grocery budget from the radical point of view that it can change my life if done thoughtfully. So check out those blog posts. Number 4, on some level you need to know that boredom and burnout are real. I wrote a little about managing those storms. The end. Peace.